Let me ask you a question. Who was the world's very first monotheist? The first person to stand up and say, hey, all these gods you're worshiping, they don't exist. There is only one.
It's a huge question, right? It gets to the very core of religious history. And for a lot of us, names like Abraham or Moses probably pop into your head.
But what if I told you the historical record points somewhere else, somewhere much, much earlier? To a revolutionary, a heretic, a pharaoh who tried to single-handedly flip 1,500 years of Egyptian religion on its head. His name was Akhenaten.
Now, to really grasp just how absolutely radical this guy's ideas were, you first have to understand the world he was born into. And believe me, this wasn't just a world with many gods. It was a world completely built on them. For a millennium and a half, Egypt was just teeming with gods. I mean, hundreds of them, each governing some little piece of your life. At the very top, you had the pharaoh, a living god on earth. But, and this is a big but, underneath him, you had this massive, super powerful network of priests. And the priesthood of the main state god, Amun-Ra, whoa, they controlled a staggering amount of land and wealth. They were a power that could and did rival the pharaoh himself. But here's the thing, even in that crowded house of gods, one idea had been gaining momentum for centuries: the power of the sun. From the old kingdom's focus on Ra to the new kingdom's supreme god Amun-Ra, the sun was always a big deal. And by the time Akhenaten's own dad was in charge, one specific aspect of the sun, the Aten, the physical disk you see in the sky, was getting some special attention. So the stage was kind of set for something big.
And when that change finally came, it wasn't some slow, subtle shift. No, it was a full-blown religious earthquake, and the shockwaves came right from the top. A new pharaoh, a guy named Amenhotep IV, takes the throne, and in just a few short years, he's going to try and completely erase the gods of his ancestors and install one single universal god in their place.
Let's just pause and look at how huge this was. On one side, traditional religion with hundreds of gods. Akhenaten, he says, nope, just one, the Aten. The old way had powerful priests worshiping in these dark secret rooms and temples. Akhenaten just sweeps them aside and says, I'm the only one who can talk to God. He builds these massive new temples that are open to the sky so everyone can worship the sun directly. And all those statues and idols? Banned. Gone. The only image allowed was a solar disk with rays ending in little hands, offering life straight to the royal family. And he did this systematically. First, he changes his own name, which was a huge public slap in the face to the god Amun. Then, he literally packs up and leaves the capital city of Thebes, the heart of Amun's power, and builds a brand new city out in the desert called Akhetaten. And then came the most extreme step of all. He declares the Aten is the only god and sends out crews to literally chisel the names and faces of the old gods, especially Amun, off of monuments all over Egypt. This was a total takeover.
But this revolution, it wasn't just about what people believed. Oh no. It spilled over and started to fundamentally change the entire culture of Egypt, starting with its art.
You see, this new faith was all about the visible world, about the light of the sun that you can actually see and feel. So it demanded a totally new way of seeing the world, and that's how the Amarna style was born.
And the art from this period is just wild. The old, rigid, perfect, timeless style, it's gone. In its place, you get art that is shockingly natural and emotional. You see the royal family just hanging out, being affectionate, the king and queen playing with their daughters. It's intimate. Akhenaten himself is shown with this strange, almost alien-like body, long limbs, a potbelly, a complete rejection of the typical heroic pharaoh image. And his queen, Nefertiti, she's often shown as his equal, suggesting she was a huge part of this new vision.
But here's the thing about a revolution this extreme, one that attacks the core beliefs and the entire power structure of a civilization that's been around for 1,500 years, it can't last. The backlash was coming, and when it came, it was total.
The second Akhenaten died, his revolution just started to crumble. His young successor, a boy named Tutankhaten, very quickly changed his name to Tutankhamun. See what he did there? He issued a decree saying the country had fallen into ruin and officially brought back the entire pantheon of old gods. That brand new capital city, Akhetaten, was just abandoned to the desert sands. Later pharaohs went even further, tearing down his temples and literally trying to erase his name from history. He became the enemy, the heretic king. They tried to make it so he never even existed.
Which, of course, brings us right back to our big question at the start. Even though his revolution failed spectacularly, was Akhenaten actually the world's first monotheist?
Well, the answer isn't a simple yes or no.
To really get into it, we have to be clear on the specific words that scholars use to talk about these kinds of ancient beliefs. So first, you've got strict monotheism. This is the idea that there is only one God, full stop. All other gods that people might worship are just false. Then there's something called monolatry. This is when you worship only one God, but you don't necessarily deny that other gods might exist for other people in other places.
And finally, there's henotheism. This is where you have one supreme God who's way above everyone else, but you still kind of allow for other, lesser divine beings to exist in the background.
So where does Akhenaten's faith fit in? Well, it's complicated. It seems like early in his reign it was more like henotheism, putting the Aten way up on a pedestal above all the other gods. But by the end, when he was actively trying to erase other gods from existence, man, he was pushing Egypt towards a true, radical monotheism, denying that any other god existed at all. And this brings us back to a really critical motive: power. As the Egyptologist John Vaines points out, by getting rid of the old priests and making himself the one and only connection to the one true God, Akhenaten was grabbing an immense amount of power for himself. It became a religion not just of God, but of God and the king.
So what's the final verdict? Was he a spiritual visionary who had a glimpse of a universal truth? Or was he a tyrant who used religion as a weapon to crush his political rivals? The thing is, because his enemies worked so hard to erase him, the complete answer is probably lost to the sands of time.
And that leaves us with one last mind-bending question. What if he had succeeded? How would the history of the world be different if monotheism took root not in the Middle East, but right there on the banks of the Nile more than 1,000 years earlier? It really is one of history's greatest what-ifs.